Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of Friday with Friends. Today, I'm joined with a new friend, Neil, and we have so much in common. The main arc of his story is how he, as a fellow non target, has gone to get some of the most competitive internships. But then, even more so, I think his background is so diverse and a unique path that all of us could benefit no matter what school you go to. Hello, Neil. Can you first share us a bit about your upbringing, high school experience, and maybe what you thought you'd be doing at the time?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I've watched the show now, so I'm glad to be on there, and I've been watching your channel for a little bit as well. But let's see. A bit about myself. I'm born in Gabon. I left there when I was about five-ish, 3 or 5. Moved here to Canada with my dad. My dad's from Rwanda. My mom's from Gabon, and kind of been in Ottawa just about ever since, really. And then as for what I thought I would be doing by now, I guess at different stages. At one point, I thought I was going to be in the NBA and I was going to be the second coming of LeBron James. And at different points, I thought I was going to be, a corporate lawyer and I was going to be quote unquote, Black Harvey Specter, and kind of live that dream. So two extremes, but that's kind of where things kind of started for me. But yeah.
Could you talk about growing up in Ottawa? I live in Toronto. Like, do you like Ottawa? How was high school for you? Did you have like various interests in high school?
Yeah, yeah. Ottawa's a quaint little. I don't know about little. It's not quite little, but definitely in comparisons to major cities like Toronto, New York, wherever, Vancouver. It's definitely small. I think it's a great city to raise a family. Not too big, not too small. Kind of got everything there. So it was great. Really enjoyed it. High school, I was I guess I had a lot of different interests. So I was kind of, jumping around from, one lunch table to another, one lunch activity to another. Usually around, basketball as that was a big thing that I did, but also, I was big into anime, big into comic books, a little bit of a nerd, but and then music as well. So, I spent, we had an hour lunch. I just probably spent an hour and half an hour playing basketball with some of my friends, and then I would go talk about the latest Naruto chapter with some of my other friends, and then I would go and talk about, the latest, Spider-Man comic, or go and jam out, play the saxophone in the music room. That was kind of my little thing every lunch. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I think so many floaters can relate. So, what I'm getting here is that you come from a very well rounded, diverse background. And I think that's one thing a lot of students sometimes get insecure about when they're applying to jobs that they're not the
Hmm.
president of their finance club, that they haven't been training since they were
Yeah.
18. But, like, come on,
Yeah.
like, what are your thoughts on being so diverse, having different interests?
I don't know. I think like something that I remember hearing a lot growing up was like jack of all trades but master of none type of thing. Um, but interestingly enough, this past year I learned that that's actually only half of the quote. The full quote is jack of all trades but master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one.
I
And
didn't
I
know
never
that.
really knew that. Yeah, I didn't know that. I found out this year. And I kind of just, we're people, right? We all have it's only natural for us to have more than one interest. And I wasn't really focused on like any one given thing in terms academically, and I wasn't doing any sort of extracurricular outside of basketball, truly. That was my main focus. But every little time I had outside of basketball, why not pick up an instrument? Why not, read a manga chapter? Why not do this? Like it was just fun to me. Like I spent all my time, working my body hard, so to speak. Next thing I do is something that is going to be like very like low intensity in terms of like physical demand. So if I could just read a manga chapter or go jam out an instrument or whatever it is, like it was rest to me. And so that's kind of how I went about my day. So it wasn't any like particular reason as to why I was doing it. It's just I enjoyed it. I thought the saxophone had a beautiful sound. Why not learn? And yeah, that's kind of how I kind of went about my days, and made decisions. Really, it's just why not?
I know this. This was very impressive to me, but you were a basketball player, like you were drafted to the States. And so I guess this can tie into why BCom at Carleton, a bit like after maybe grade
Yeah,
12. Take us back there.
yeah. So grade 12, pandemic hits in, I think, February, March. They told, no, it was after March break. So March break, they told us that we're not going back. So I'm class of 2020 high school. I guess I should probably give you that background. So first year of the pandemic, we go away to March break, and during in the middle of our March break, they tell us you're not coming back. Like it's been extended another 2 weeks, and after that, it was kind of like understood that like we're not coming back. And during that time, like basketball was a main priority, I guess, so to speak, in my life. I practiced, on this team every day. We had so school was from 9:15 to 3:30. In the morning, 5:30 to 7:30, I practiced with the trainer, head to school until 3:30. 3:30 would hit, and then I'd get on the bus to get to the other side of town. Um, so 2 hour bus ride, 2.5 hours, 2 hours for this practice on the other side of town because that team got to practice every day. So that's what I wanted more than anything. They get to practice every day. All the other teams in my area, they practice 2 times, 3 times a week. Let me go to that team over there and practice more. And they did their practices. So 5:30 to 7:30, we'd study. 7:30 to 9:30, we'd be in the weight room. 9:30 to 11:30 ish, we'd be on the court, and then hit the showers, and then get on the bus to get back home. And that was kind of like my schedule during the week, 5 days a week, and then on the weekends we'd go to tournaments. And so when the pandemic happened and that was kind of broken up, shaken up because we couldn't do that anymore, I all of a sudden had a whole lot more time on my hands. But I was still very, very focused on trying to go to play basketball. And my mother, I live with my father and my stepmom here in Canada, but my mother was in Alabama at the time. My mother's there, my sister's there. I never really got to grow up living with them since I left back home. So I wanted anything I could do to go to school over there, be close to mom, be close to my sister, is what I kind of wanted to do. And if I can marry the two, the idea of basketball and being close to mom and my sister, by all means, I'll do it. And so I started sending like videos of my games to all the coaches down there. And eventually one of them was willing to, have me out for tryouts and, go over there. So when we figured out that I wasn't going back to school for high school, that is, for the rest of the senior year, I got on a flight to go back to go see my mom. And, I practiced with the team, played throughout the entire rest of the semester and the summer. And for all intents and purposes, I think I did pretty good. I can toot my own horn, so to speak. And I kind of got myself a spot on a roster as a redshirt for my first year. And I was really happy. We had preseasons come in, and I just kind of got to live that dream of being a Division I basketball player. And it was all going great. Unfortunately, I got hurt and I got sent back home. So that was a big shot to the ego, so to speak. But it led me to come back to Ottawa. And when I got back home, I had to enroll in something. So I got back home around October-ish. So I guess we fast forwarded quite a bit. But I got back home from Bama in around October. Most schools have already started; they're already underway. I can't quite make it. I can't register for any courses. The semester is well underway. So I ended up taking like a gap year, so to speak, right? Because it was too late for me to get into any programs. I couldn't really transfer mid-semester from Bama to here. It was just a big fiasco. Plus, I had to recover from the injury. I had to mentally adjust to, no longer being an athlete, no longer playing, kind of figure out like what's the rest of my life going to be. As crazy as it sounds, because I'm really like I'm 18. You have your whole life ahead of yourself. But for all intents and purposes, I thought my life was over. I was like, I can't play basketball anymore. What's gonna happen? Um, but yeah, so I got back home and I was looking into programs at Bama. I was in poli sci and pre-law. I was managed to take a few. I've been to a few classes, a couple of weeks of classes while I was there. Love the pre-law stuff. Absolutely hated poli sci, like with a grueling passion. It just wasn't it for me. I found it boring. I found it dry. Maybe it's the way the professors are teaching it. I don't know. I just realized that it wasn't for me. And then I started to realize, like, this poli sci pre-law thing, I only took it because in high school, in grade 10, at some point, I'd searched up like what are the most common degrees that people take in undergrad before they go to law. And poli sci was there. I was never really drawn to politics or political science at all. It's just this is what most people that go to law school, among the majors that they take. So I picked it. Um, Not because I had any particular affinity or enjoyment of the area. So I started having doubts and I started realizing like, hey, this poli sci pre-law thing, I feel like I'm pretty boxed in. If I ever did decide to not be a lawyer, I wouldn't be able um, to kind of do anything else. So I figured I need to find something that will, stand on its own. So I figured I've got a few months of gap year. Let me figure out what's interesting to me, what I want to take during that time. Um, and yeah, just that whole year started looking into different areas, different things that I'm interested in, different things that I've enjoyed throughout high school, like just like looking back. And I fell into like business and I was like, what? I've always wanted to do business. I've always liked finance, but I hate math and I stopped taking math classes as soon as I could no longer had to. I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be a lawyer. I don't need math. So, screw the math class. Let's take all these social sciences and all those courses. And yeah, so around I want to say around June-ish, I had come to terms with the fact that like, yeah, I'm not going back to poli sci and pre-law. I want to do finance. I want to do business. I really liked it. It sounds really cool to me. I was learning what a stock was. I was learning about GameStop and all those, all the personal finance stuff that was going on around, I guess 2021 or late 2021. So I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. But I was already registered for Ottawa U Poli Sci for that following year, right? Poli Sci and pre-law. So I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Can I transfer? And I reached out, and it's like mid-June or July. I'm reaching out to them, call Ottawa U. Ottawa U because like I went to high school in French, so they had a French program. It was kind of a perfect match. I called them. They're like, hey, Telford School of Business is already full. You can't just, like we're at capacity. There's nothing we can do. I was like, oh snap, okay. Can I come in as like a January, like a second semester, winter semester? Can I come in there? And they're like, we only have fall admissions for this program. I was like, oh damn, okay, I can't do that. And then I was like, am I gonna have to do another year of this program that I know I don't want to do? Or is there another way around it? And then my girlfriend at the time was like, oh, well, you can like maybe take like all electives that will transfer to this business program. It won't be a perfect match, but at least it'll give you something. Right. And then I was like, okay, you know what? That's a good idea. Let me work my schedule around and, only take courses I know will transfer over. Maybe they're business electives or intro to business that I already could have taken, like things like that. Like trying to plan accordingly so that as many of the courses I'm going to have to take this year will transfer over to business and finance, and then I'll kind of deal with the rest. Um, and that was the plan. And then someone, someone was in a similar position and told me that that's what he was doing. So I was like, okay, someone has already done this. Someone is doing this. There's a path for me to do this if I want to. Um, so that was the original plan. And then maybe a couple weeks down the line after that, my girlfriend had the crazy idea of telling me, "Have you tried contacting Sprott and seeing if you can get into like the Sprott School of Business at Carleton?" And I was like, "Oh my God, no, I haven't. Like it wasn't even on my radar." And it's another university in Ottawa. I should have been like my very next call afterwards, but I was like dead set on. I went to high school in French. I'm going to go to whatever university has a French program. It just made the most logical sense. But my girlfriend had been going to Carleton for a year at that point. So she was like, yeah, we have a business school here too. And I was like, yeah, of course you guys do. So I give them a call. I speak to this wonderful lady called Rhonda Kelly. She's a first year advisor. And she's like, and I asked her, hey, I'm enrolled into Ottawa U for the fall semester. Does Carleton accept mid-year transfers into the Sprout School of Business? And they're like, yeah, yeah, we do, of course. Come on down. And she's like, and I'm like, oh, okay, perfect. And she's like, but why do you want to come mid-year? And I'm like, what do you mean? I was like, well, we still have spots available for like fall. And I had asked for mid-year because I was under the assumption that like if Ottawa U's program was full, Carleton's program surely is full as well, since we're in June or July at that point. And she's like, oh no, we still have 8 spots. If you want one, you can join our business program as of like right now, and you'll start in September with everybody else. I was like, yes, please sign. Like, where do I sign? What do you need me to send you? What do you want? Right? I'll get you whatever you need. And she asked me for my WAC number. I start sending all the stuff. I make an application, and then she's looking at it all, and she's like, hey, Neil, I'm really sorry to let you know, but like, you have 3 math classes from high school that you did not take, so we can't let you into the program. And I was just like, I felt like a shank and a twist. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, oh my God. I didn't even think of like these math courses that I tried to get out or weasel my way out of in high school would come back to bite me in the butt today. I was like, well, what can I do? And she's like, well, there's no other way unless if you're gonna, find a way somehow to like finish these 3 courses within, the 6 weeks that we have left before school starts. And I was like, okay, that's what I'll do. And she's like, and I don't know if she believed that I could do it or not, but she was like, okay, give me a call when you're done. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing else that could be done. And so at the time I was working, I had a little 9 to 5, but every day before work and every day after work, I would sit down and I would drill these classes. I got into like this like online university, no, high school program. I think it's called TVO LLC, something like that, where I got to take courses online. They had like a Brightspace set up, and you just do them at your own pace. The teachers were really nice, and they said, like, don't worry about homework, don't worry about this or that. Just give me the let me know when you're ready for your midterm and your final, and then that's all that I really care about. I was like, okay, so I sat down, drilling it out, learning about, taking, math, 11th grade math, taking 12th grade math, and I got to take calculus. Like, I'm really trying to get it all done in 2 weeks increments because that's the only way I was going to make it through. And they're just like, I'm flying through whatever I can, but like, mind you, like, little known fact about me, I graduated high school with a 94 average, but my highest ever grade in high school math was a 57. Like I've just been putrid in math since the last time I had an A in math was grade 6. Like by that point, anyways, like I've just always been bad at math. And so like I was like, not only do I need to pass these courses, I also need to get at least an 80 average if I'm going to get into Carleton's program. And then I also have this time constraint of only like 6 weeks, which means 2 weeks per course. Girlfriend's in engineering. She's very well, she's very capable in math, and she'd help me after work and after her school days and whatever. And we kind of just drilled it down, and somehow we made it through every 2 weeks, getting a class done and taking that midterm, taking that exam, and somehow I made it through. Just reached that like that number that I needed, which actually that's like because on the calculus course, I failed to reach like the 80 minimum. I got below that. And I was off by like a couple percentages. I forget the exact number. And I had to retake the class again, repay for it. Thankfully, again, the professor, the teacher, he did not care about the assignment. Like he's like, no assignments, no mini tests or nothing like that. Just get the midterm and the final. And this time it's going to be different because they knew like I'd already taken it. But I literally like I didn't get the grade that I needed. Had to retake the class. But in the interim, I'm reaching out like, okay, if I can't get into this program, what's the closest thing to business and finance that I can take where I can get into that program and maybe try to weasel my way back into business afterwards? And I reached out to the faculty of economics. They had their like bar for the math class was a little bit lower. I had just made that. So I was like, can you just register me in this Bachelor of Econ program so I know I'm going to school for sure? And then I can kind of figure something out because the only way for me to like make the application through WAC, I guess I'm jumping back and forth, but the only way for me to apply to Carleton's program would be to rescind my Ottawa U acceptance, which means if I rescinded it and within these 6 weeks I can't, get through all the math courses and everything, that means I'm not going to school at all. And my parents are already on my behind about like that year that I wasn't in school at all. There's no way they're going to allow me to have a second year without school. Not even like half the year for a semester. Like they were just, there was just not a possibility. In fact, when I did the thing and I rescinded my acceptance and I started doing the process with Carleton, I was too scared to tell my father. Like there is no way I was going to tell him the risk that I had taken. You know what I mean? Knowing that they know that I'm horrible at math, knowing that they know that like I'm already in this program, there's a path for me to graduate in 4 years and then go to law school like the original plan was. So like I'm taking a big risk. I was too scared to even mention it to them. So I just kept my mouth shut and just woke up and started doing math and then went to work. And honestly, any downtime I had at work, I would still do math. And then the same thing after work. But anyways, my point being is I failed to get like the 80 minimum on that calculus class. I enrolled in it again and really tried to like get it because I was like, okay, I'm gonna re-enroll in it again. I'm gonna take the test in 4 days. So I need to like, I'm gonna take the midterm in 2 days. I'm gonna take the final in 4 days. Let's get this done. And I sat through it. Somehow I got the grade that I needed. I called back Miss Rhonda Kelly. I told her, hey, Miss Rhonda, is there still a spot? I just finished the classes. I just sent you an email. Here are my grades, blah, 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 blah. And she's like, Neil, there's 2 spots left. I'll get you in. And I said, thank you, thank you, thank you. She got me in and I kind of made it into Carleton. And I was like, I'm not looking back. Like, this is it. I'm not looking back. I also have to forego my like credits from Bama. They didn't transfer over. I'm starting fresh as a first year student. I was like, I don't care. Let's just get this done. Sat my parents down, told them. My father looked, my father was shell shocked, but he didn't say anything. He's like, are you still planning on going to law school? Because, that was the talk that we had for, I don't know how many years. They were very much, doctor, lawyer, engineer. I sure as hell was not going to do 12 years of school to be a doctor. I hate math, so engineering was out the picture from the get-go. Law was the only option that was left. And now I'm doing finance. I'm no longer doing this pre-law program. It was like, is law still the plan? I said yes. They're like, okay, whatever. You made it. They're mad about the whole not telling them thing, but they're like, whatever. All then that ends well. And we kind of left it at that. But yeah, so that was like my entrance into Carleton, and the road was pretty rocky, but I think it serves me well so thus far. But yeah,
Holy, what a story. And, on top of the fact that math has not come naturally to you, that's just a
not my thing.
triumphant story. And it's almost like I love the parallel between you in high school, grinding for basketball, before
Yeah,
school, after school, taking the transportation, and, at this time trying to go to Carleton. Like, regardless
yeah,
on what your goal was at a certain point of your life, you've always been
yeah.
such a hard worker. And I think that's safe to say, even in university, like that has transferred on.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the one thing I've noticed in my personality is I kind of tend to hyperfixate on the things that I really enjoy or whatever the goal is at that moment. Unfortunately, I often let go of the other things that are in the peripheral. But whenever I do have a goal that is within reach, whatever it might be, I do tend to hyperfixate and, do whatever I can to get it done, whether that was basketball or getting into the finance program or getting into banking and all that. I'm sure we'll touch on that later. But yeah, that was kind of, I guess that's my MO, so to speak. But yeah.
Okay. So you started your first year in Carleton after that huge story, a big win for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about your internship journey thus far? In like the
Yeah.
rockiness, maybe you had mentors, but like starting from first year.
Yeah. Yeah. So very first thing I did in the first year, um, I guess in my little off time when I wasn't studying math, I was learning about like all the clubs and the things that Carleton had to offer. When I was registered at Ottawa U, even though I never really got to attend, I had joined this like finance club because I wanted to just learn more about it. And they had told me that there's equivalents at Carleton. And so I started searching for what that equivalent is, found a few names through their website, looked them up on LinkedIn. I had like no LinkedIn presence at all. I had like an account that we made in my careers and class in like grade 10 or whatever. No picture, no nothing. Like, it's just an account. It was there. I had even forgotten I had there. I just tried to create it, like sign up and create an account, and it said my email is already associated to an account. Guessed one of my, four passwords that I have, and it worked. And I saw my profile, nothing. Um, but yeah, so I searched them up. A few of them actually answered, which I was very surprised by. And I asked them like, "Hey, what's this, club that you guys got going on at Carleton? I want to know about it. I'm interested. I'm coming in September. Hopefully, at that point, I didn't even know that I was coming for sure. But I was trying to reach out to them. Eventually, when I got in September, they had interviews for that club, and I, interviewed as for the intern position. I made it in, and my whole thought process was is that like, if I'm interested in finance, I want to know like what's the big law equivalent of finance, um, and what is like that equivalent, and then can I have internships in there? Because my thought process was if I do a couple internships in this big law equivalent, I'll be a shoe in for the top law school, and when I go to those top law schools, I'll be a shoe in for the big law internships. So that was my overall, thought process. And so I'm asking them, trying to get an understanding of like the overall finance space. Because all I knew is I thought stocks were cool and fun, but I didn't really know anything about finance beyond that. So they're kind of giving me the lay of the land, like, oh, well, there's these things called high finance roles, consulting, banking, PE, venture capital, hedge funds, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, okay, cool. And again, like I tend to hyperfixate when I find things interesting. And so they would tell me about these things and I would go home and I'm like, okay, what is investment banking? Okay, this is what they do. Okay, cool. What is private equity? What is hedge fund? What is consulting? And I would kind of like, I remember like I had took a piece of paper and I had like a little box and wrote investment banking and would make like little lines about what they do, what it is, what it leads to, what do people do to get into it, blah, 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 until I had like a whole map. I was like, okay, this is what high finance is. What are the other roles in finance that are not necessarily high finance? Am I interested in that? Yes, no, maybe so. Okay, cool. And that's kind of like my thought process. Once I really got into, I was like, okay, these are the roles I want to aim for, which was investment banking. I was like, okay, what do I need to do in order to get that? And I kind of worked my way backwards. So like I said, okay, if I want to eventually at some point, if I'm thinking of, working in this field as opposed to law, my dad is going to need like a solid deck presentation as to why this is an option and is a better option than law school. So I had to be ready, and I was expecting it for him to like eventually start, asking me about this stuff. So I was like, okay, it's coming, just a matter of when. Let me be ready. And I started, getting all the stuff that I could to get ready, learning the way of the land, learning the industry, learning what the exit opportunities are, learning what this is, that is, whatever it is. And I had mapped out that like, okay, I would like in a perfect world, at this point, I was like, yeah, I'm not going back to law. This is what I want to do. In a perfect world, I would love to run my own fund. I was like, that is like the ultimate. If you're telling me you have, okay, no, if I only have one wish, that's probably not the one wish I would have. Like, if I could have like one career wish, that's my one career wish. Run my own fund and have it be successful. I was like, how do I attain that goal? And I was like, okay, well, I probably need to work in a fund first, right? Learn the trade, learn the industry, learn the business, and I can start my own. I was like, okay, cool. Well, where do funds hire from? Oh, they hire from Ivy League schools or the top investment banks in the US. I was like, well, I don't go to an Ivy League school. So the only thing I can do now, like the arrow leads to get into the top investment banks in the US. I'm like, okay, cool. Back to the drawing board. Where do the top investment banks in the US hire from? Oh, Ivy League schools again. I'm like, man, I really should have gone to an Ivy, but wasn't in the cards for me, right? If it's not the top Ivy Leagues in the US, where else do they hire from? Majoritarily. the Big Five in Canada. A lot of people are transferring from the Big Five in Canada to the bulge brackets in the United States. I was like, okay, cool. Maybe I can get into there. Circled Big Five in Canada and started to figure out where do they hire from. Oh, there's these things called, target schools in Canada. Ivy, Queens, McGill, U of C, Waterloo. I think that's probably most of them. UBC in the West Coast. But that's kind of like the big six, so to speak, right? I'm like, damn, I don't go to either of those schools, any of those schools. What do I do now? And they're like, well, if you don't go to those schools, what people often do also is they work Big Four or they work at a boutique and they try to like transfer into the Big Five or Big Six Canadian banks. I was like, okay, that's what I have to do. That's going to be my way of entry. It's going to be a long road, but screw it. If those are the cards that I'm dealt with, you got kind of have to do what you have to do. And so I went back to the fund after a fund meeting, and I asked them like, hey guys, this is what I want to do. Can you guys help me get there? And I'm sure to them, I'm like, who's this crazy first year? You haven't even been here for 2 weeks, and you're talking about starting your own fund and working for the big U.S. banks and the big Canadian banks. I had this like whole map, and I still have it, but like no, like I don't know what's associated with every position. I don't know what you need to do. I know nothing. I just know that this is the path that I'm going to take. And a few of them looked at me and were like, I can't really help you. Like, you don't know anything. And a few of the other ones were like, hey, like you sound like a really great kid. Just giving you heads up, we don't go to a target school. Like there's the odds of you making it. I vividly remember this. And I don't think he meant anything wrong by it. Like he was, looking out for me. He was like, hey, the odds of you making it are very, very slim because we're not Ivy, we're not Queens, we're not whatever. Right. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, but is it zero? Because for me, like I had heard that my entire life. They told me the odds of you, playing basketball are going to be very low because I hit 5 foot for the first time in grade 9, so I was a really short guy. So they're like the odds of you playing basketball in high school are very low, and then when I did play, the odds of you playing basketball outside of high school are very very low. The thoughts of you, being an all-star player in high school or playing Division 1 are very, very low. So like I had heard that my entire life. So, like I wasn't afraid of it. I was like, as long as it's not zero, there's a chance. So are you telling me it's zero or are you telling me it's very, very low? And they're like, well, the odds are no point, no, 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 one. I was like, as long as it's not zero, I'm okay. And my thought process was, okay, well, you know what? If that's the case, I'm going to give it 2 years. And if I can't get an internship within these next 2 years, then I'm going to transfer into Ivy or transfer into Queens or whatever it is. And, I'll have to get student loans and I'll have to, do that, which I didn't want to do. But if that's the only way to break in, then that's what I'll have to do. But for now, I'm going to go as hard as I can during these 2 years and act like this whole target school thing doesn't exist. Right. And they said, and some of them were like, okay, cool. What are you going to, like, what do I need to do in order to make that a possibility? They said, you're going to have a perfect GPA and you're going to have to ace all your technicals. I was like, okay, perfect. And then I, was heading out of the room and I was like, okay, now I got to go. I got my next mission. I got to get a perfect GPA and I got to ace my technicals. But right before I left the room, I remember asking them, do you guys have perfect GPAs? And they're like, pretty much, we have a 12.0 scale. So they're like, I've got an 11.75 or I got an 11, I got 11.9. So they're really high up there. I was like, okay, cool. So they're also seemingly everyone that's in this fund is also interested in these high finance careers. They all have really high resumes. They're, heading towards that goal as well. Their third, fourth year, they're about to do it. I went home that day. I popped open their LinkedIn's and I realized they don't have the roles that they said that they wanted. They wanted these investment banking roles, but they weren't going to those for internships. Some of them had already signed to go back full time elsewhere, and all sorts of things. So that they're doing, government work, all or outside of the Big Five or outside of the Big Four, accounting, whatever it is. And I'm like, that's great, but that's not what I wanted. And based off my conversations with them, they also wanted these high finance roles, but they're not doing it. I'm like, there's got to be something missing to this equation. Like they're telling me that you need a perfect GPA, you need to ace your technicals, There's just got to be something else because you guys have basically perfect GPAs. You're smarter than anyone I've ever met in terms of finance knowledge. So I can't see how you're not acing these technicals. What's the missing piece? Because if I do the exact same thing that you're doing, I probably will have the same result and it's not going to work. Right. And so the only thing I thought I could do is ask people who are already in the industry. And because I didn't know anyone, I just opened up LinkedIn. I put investment banker. Like I didn't know like the breakdown between analyst, associate. I knew nothing. I just put investment banker on LinkedIn, press enter, filtered for people. 100 million different people popped up, and I just went connect, 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 until LinkedIn told me to slow down and froze my connection request button, basically. Um, and even then, like very, very few people actually replied to me or even accepted. I think the first time I did it, like nobody, because my profile is still like a little gray profile picture, nothing. So I was like, okay, I just stopped back and I was like, you know what? Like this is probably similar to Instagram. If someone with a great profile picture, no posts, no followers, no following follows me, I'm not accepting that. So I was like, okay, let me fill out my profile. Okay, cool. Now I've got a profile. I put my school. I put the little part-time jobs that I had at, Little Caesars, McDonald's, Bath and Body Works, like everywhere that I've worked. I put that on my LinkedIn. And then I was like, I need some sort of presence. I have zero connections right now. No one is going to accept me. So I figured I took my high school graduation paper where it had like the name and the face of everyone that I went to high school with in my class. I searched them up. Maybe like 10% of them had a LinkedIn, but those 10 people knew my name, knew my face. They're more likely to actually accept. So cool. I got 10 people now. Then I had Carleton on my LinkedIn and Sprott School of Business. I said, well, people who also have Carleton and Sprott School of Business are probably likely to accept me. So I just went on alumni and like the student like the alumni section on LinkedIn for Carleton and the Sprott School of Business. And I just went connect, 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 connect. And then all of a sudden, like a bunch of those people started accepting because I was like, oh, this guy goes to Carleton. I go to Carleton. Let's be friends, right? And so all of a sudden now I go from, zero to maybe 50, 75. Oh, now I just hit 100. Cool. Now I probably have a better luck with those investment bankers because I'm not just a great profile. I actually have a presence. I actually have something. I also did the same thing with like everyone I could find that worked at McDonald's, because I worked at McDonald's. Like, and some people are in like McDonald's Abu Dhabi, which I will never meet you ever. But because you worked at McDonald's and I worked at McDonald's, they'll probably accept my connection requests. And I realized that once I got to like 200, like 150 to like 250 connection requests, connections on my profile, all of a sudden the investment bankers that I was like reaching out to, they would at least accept it, right? So now let's say I, try to do connection requests with like 500 investment bankers, maybe 10% of those actually accept it. And then from there, maybe 10% respond to my message that said, hi, my name is Neil. I'm a student here at Carleton. I'm interested in investment banking. Would love to hear about like how you got in, right? Because my whole process was I need to find the missing piece of this equation. What's missing to their equation that I could add so that I can make it in? And very, very few people answered, but those that did and that got on a call with me, they're like, oh, well, I went to Ivy and I worked really hard and I did this and I did that. And then you got a network and then you do this, you do that. Cool. Write notes, write notes, write notes. After like 10 calls, and every single one of the 10 calls, they said networking. And then at one point, I was just fed up. I think maybe to call 10 or call 11, whatever it is. I'm like, okay, what is networking? Like you all say that. I've done like 10 calls with people. They all say networking. What does that mean? Right? And they're like, well, you're doing exactly that. Just ask people what it is that they did to get in, ask about their industry, ask about their day to day, learn about, the business and what they do. And that's what networking is. I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, well, doesn't everybody do that? Like, isn't that how you learn about anything by asking questions? And like, yeah, but sometimes people get nervous, they get scared, they want to, interrupt someone, they feel like they have nothing to bring to the table from this professional. I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, okay, cool. So you're telling me if I network, I can, make it in investment banking? And they're like, yeah, that's literally all you have to do. I was like, okay, perfect. That's what I'll do. And I realized that's probably the missing piece of this equation. Get perfect grades, ace your technicals, and network. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And then I started asking, like, how important really is having perfect grades? And one of the guys was really, really candid with me. He was like, honestly, get a 3.5 GPA is probably all you need. Get maybe slightly above that to give yourself a margin of safety, and then you're good. I was like, okay. And then I, made a pie chart of like my time. I was like, okay, I had to work to cover tuition. So 30% of my days is already covered with work. I spent like 10% on school, and the rest of my time was spent networking. And I was like, as long as I can maintain a 10.0 GPA, which is a 3.8, um, I'm fine, right? That'll be good if I ever want to go to grad school. That's good enough. And I'm not going to like the marginal benefit of getting a perfect GPA versus the time that you're losing, the opportunity cost that you're losing by not being able to network was too big for me. So I was like, it's not worth getting a perfect GPA, right? And I spent the rest of my time just networking. And again, like first year, especially first year, first semester, it's really, really easy stuff. Like intro to business, you're just learning what marketing is, what supply chain is, what this is. It's just basically definitions and answers. So that was really easy to do. I didn't really have to spend more time than necessary on that. The only class that kind of took some time was economics, intro to economics. I never taken an economics course. That was the only thing that was like relatively time consuming. The rest was all kind of review of high school. So I was okay to like, not spend as much time on school and spend more time networking. And all I did is I would get on any call with any analyst that was willing to give me time, ask them questions, they would answer, we'd have a good conversation. And I would always close off our calls by saying this, thank you so much for your time. I really, truly appreciate it. I just wanted to know quickly, is there anyone else on your team or in your firm that you recommend I speak to? So maybe I can learn a bit more about their role. And then they would say, maybe they have a name for me, maybe they don't. That's okay. If they have a name, I'd go on to the next part of my script, which was, thank you so much once again. Would you be okay maybe giving me a warm introduction to this person? Maybe they say yes, maybe they say no. But if they said yes, then this person will put me in a group chat with, with their colleague or whatever it is. And then that gives me an easy way to talk to that person and schedule my next call. If they say no, I can still message them and say, hey, so and so told me to reach out to you as you'd be a great person for me to learn from. Would you be free for a quick call about this? And that person is more likely to answer because I've been sent by someone that they know and trust. You know what I mean? And that was like my thought process. Like I had the script written, I had it on a post-it on my computer, and I would read off of it at the end of my call. And it really worked because they would give me a few names, and then sometimes they would give me the name of someone that's like a level above them, an associate. Sometimes they gave me the name of someone who's a colleague of theirs, an analyst, or sometimes they give me the name of their current intern or their past intern. I did not care. Just give me any name. I'll talk to whoever, whatever you're willing to give me, I'll take it. And then I would get on that call with that next person and do the same thing. And they would give me another name, and that would keep going. But the thing that I always made sure I did is I would always go back to the original person and say, oh my God, thank you so much for giving me that name. I spoke with them. I learned this, this, and this. Do you have another name for me? And sometimes they give me another name. Sometimes they didn't matter. I just showed that I actually followed through on what I said I was going to do. And I showed some gratitude for thanking them for, helping me get this call. And then sometimes I would branch off and to give me another name. Sometimes I wouldn't. But the point is that slowly but surely, my spider web would grow and grow and grow and grow. And I made it from like an intern all the way to an MD, different MDs, different desks, different teams. And I was trying to just get an understanding of like the land, like what's out there. I wasn't as specific on any given firm. I didn't know about any different, like I didn't know. I knew that RBC was like a really big company. I mean, my parents banked with RBC. I had an account with RBC, but like I didn't know who's number one, who's number two, who's the biggest bank, who's the smallest bank. Like I had no idea, no concept of what that was exactly. I just figured these are the big five, these are the big six. Whoever I can talk to over there is what I'll do. Again, working through my plan, also looking at boutique investment banks, um, because I thought okay, I probably have a better shot of getting into those ones than I do the big fives. But right now, I just want to understand the industry. So anyone who's a banker, I'll talk to you. Um, and then that kind of leads us off into like November, December-ish of my first semester, first year.
Sorry, I just need to pause there because
Yeah,
I it's unbelievable that that's just November or December of your first year. Like that took me like a year. Like even when I recruited for Scotia S&T, I didn't know
yeah,
what investment banking is. Like
right.
that, that's unbelievable. I just need to say that. Good for you.
Yeah, no, no, of course. Thank you. Again, I think that's just like my, I guess like my little obsessive nature. Like I get like almost compulsive about the things I find interesting that I'm passionate about. I go like all in and I'll wake up realizing like 2 months have passed and like, okay, I should probably do something else or have a little bit of me time before I burn out. But that's kind of like again, I did the same thing with basketball. I did the same thing with music when I was playing instruments. I did the same thing like almost everything that I do. But yeah, so around November, December, I started realizing like an interesting phenomenon, which was like on LinkedIn, the recruiters are more popular than the CEOs. And like I didn't understand why like the recruiters have so many connections and the CEOs often have like so little. And then I thought about it, I was like, well, you know what? Like, even if I reach out to the CEO, like he's not the one that's gonna see my resume. You know what I mean? Like he's not the one that's I'm sure he could do something to try to get me a job, sure, but like who's more likely to see my resume is a recruiter. So who can I get on like how can I get in touch with these recruiters is probably the smartest thing I can do. I was like, okay, let me try to connect with these recruiters, but they have 20,000 connection requests. Even if I send a request today, it's probably take them a month before they even get to like my name in the list of all the people who has requested them. So I figured, okay, I've talked to enough people. And by the way, at the same time, like I would log everything of my calls with these people. Sometimes they tell me that they got a new dog or they're picking up little Timmy from, baseball practice. That's why they're a few minutes late. Like I would log that. And next time I got on a call with them, I was like, oh, how's little Timmy's baseball game? Or, just to make sure that like I was circling back to these people and had like points of like entry. So I was very like meticulous about like writing these things out. I had a big like list of like names. I was like, okay, I don't necessarily need like more analysts, more associates, whatever it is, but maybe these people can put me in contact with a recruiter, right? And it's probably easier for them to put me in contact with a recruiter than one of their colleagues who's probably just as busy as them, right? And so I started reaching out, and they're like, "Oh yeah, of course. Here's the name of a recruiter. I'll send her a note to expect a message from you, and you'll to kind of take it from there." And I have a feeling, based off of like the names that I was given, there's always like 4 or 5 names per bank, and that was kind of it. So I think that those recruiters like inboxes got filled with my name because I went through like my entire list of like names and I was asking like, hey, do you have a name of a recruiter that you think I should, speak to? I'm really interested, blah, 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 blah. And then like, hey, here's this name. And the next person would also give me the same name and they would tell me that they'll send them a note to expect a message from you. So those poor recruiters probably got their inbox flooded with like, this kid Neil from Carleton really wants to speak to you. But yeah, and eventually, like I finally got on a call with one from BMO, from RBC, um, and they kind of gave me at first. They gave me like the regular spiel. We applications open then. Make sure you apply. Blah 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 blah. Kind of do your thing that way. And eventually things like open houses started popping up around November and December, and I was there. I was like, okay, I'm in this big Zoom call or this big Teams call, and these guys have, they go to Ivy, they go to Queens, they're almost a shoe in. What can I do to stand out? Oh, none of them have cameras on. All right, camera on. None of them are talking. I'm asking any question I can. Every time even if I didn't have a question, like I would like Google questions, like questions to ask, just so like they would see my face, they would see my name. I'm always popping up and just to like be at the forefront of their mind, so to speak. And one of the questions that I asked for a BMO open house was, I'm a non-target student. What can I do to stand out to get in? And the recruiter answered. And then, the call ended. And I thought, okay, that was a pretty good call. They've got another session tomorrow. It's supposed to be the exact same thing. I'm still going to show up. even though it's the same thing, I'm gonna be there again. I'm just gonna kind of be there all the time. And all of a sudden, I get a call from a number in Toronto, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. I pick it up. It's that same recruiter. Her name was Jetty Tam, and she was so nice to me. But she basically said like she loved my question. Not too many people asked that question, and she's talking about how like BMO is doing all this thing to try and like make it that target schools or non-target school doesn't really matter anymore. We want to help you guys get in, and she appreciated that I asked the question, and she was so nice about it. And I was like, oh my god, like I got a recruiter that actually called me, and I remember I was at my girlfriend's house, and I was literally like jumping in joy, like oh my, I'm actually talking to one, and they're not giving me like the cookie cutter recruiter response, apply when applications open and kind of be ready. Like she's actually giving me like solid advice. And I kind of like kept in touch with her and stayed in touch throughout the rest of that first semester. And around January, applications opened and I just went on a fury, like applying everywhere I could. Like I'd be in class one day and I'd scroll through LinkedIn and I'd see someone like a post about an application opening at some obscure investment bank in the middle of nowhere. I started applying and log in, create a website on there like Workday, make an application, whatever it might be. First of all, I hate Workday because you ask me to input my resume, but then you still make me. Anyways, yeah, I digress. It's a horrible system. But yeah, so I'd go through that, do whatever it is that I could. Eventually, like things started popping up, and I was like, what can I do to like stand out? I would reach out to back to that list of people and I say, hey, I just applied. Can you help me prep? What can you tell me? What should I expect? Blah, blah, blah. They were all so nice. We've been talking for months now. A lot of them were like, open to just talking to me casually about what they're doing, what they're learning, what they're doing that I can apply. How can I prep, whatever it is. And so I kind of like took that at heart. They're like, hey, like I would get really good at this. I would get really good at that. And that's kind of what I did. And applications opened up. And that recruiter from BMO was super nice to me. I thought like I had a really good shot with BMO. I was just waiting for like interviews to start, popping up. And then I went on a trip to Punta Cana for a reading week. I was like, this is my like little break before like interviews start like really coming in. I'm keeping tabs on Wall Street Prep or Wall Street Oasis to see if people are getting interviews. And I'm like, okay, like interviews are about to start popping up any second now. Let me go on this little trip for reading week, and then I'm going to come back and be ready. While I was there, recruiter from RBC is willing to get on a call with me. I talked to her. She's like, okay, I really think you should apply. I think you've got a really good shot. You seem like you're really about it. You've spoken to a lot of people. I've heard your name a bunch of times. I think you should apply. And I'm like, I will apply. Like whenever you want me to, I'm ready. And she sent me the link to apply to. I applied. And I don't think the link was public for that one yet. I'm not 100% sure, but I really don't think it was public yet because I'd been refreshing my RBC careers page and I wasn't finding anything. But she sent me this link, and all of a sudden I can apply. So I went through that process, and when I got back, interviews started popping up. I was applying for M&A roles because I was the one that was going to lead higher into the buy side roles, which will help me get into a fund and be able to run my own fund. So that was like, okay, M&A is the holy grail of the finance roles. Let me make sure I get that. I'm interviewing for RBC. I think I'm doing well. I eventually get cut, unfortunately. Right before I get cut, they ask me, have you ever thought about DCM? And like I knew what DCM was, but like I didn't really know too much about that capital markets. Again, my goal was to get into M&A. I sure as hell wasn't going to say no. I'm not interested in DCM. I said, yeah, of course. I've always been interested in DCM. It was M&A and DCM. You know, I just didn't know if I could apply to both. So, and I kind of like weaseled my way in that way. And they're like, oh, interesting. Okay, well, we have an interview spot for DCM still. Would you be interested? I said, of course. When? And like tomorrow 9 a.m. Be there, be square. And I was like, okay, I'll be there. And I didn't. The entire night I had to learn about like DCM, and I knew nothing. But again, like if someone ask you, are you interested in this investment banking role that you've never heard of, but you think that like it's leading towards like it sounds like you're about to tell me that like there's a position for me. I definitely like I'm not gonna say no. And so I spent the entire night trying to understand what DCM is, what do they do, blah, 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 blah. And I get in the interview and it's more so behavioral. So I like to think I'm a pretty personable person. So I wasn't really worried about the behavioral portion. Is more so technical because I knew nothing about fixed income and bonds. Again, like I'm in my first year. I'm in my first accounting class right now. What can I like? We haven't even touched what a bond is just yet. Um, and so I'm doing that. And then he asked me a question about like the relationship between interest rates and bond yields. And this is a very like easy answer knowing what I know now. They go in opposite directions. That's all you really need to know. But I didn't know. Like I just learned what DCM was the night before. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, I don't know the answer. How can I kind of like BS my way through and give a somewhat decent answer? And I said, well, you know what, sir? Like, I don't know the answer, but if you'll allow me, I'd like to think out loud and maybe we can come up with an answer together. And I think he really liked that because instead of me saying, like, I don't know the answer and not attempting, I let it be known that I'm unsure. And I walked him through my thought process and my reasoning. And we kind of came to a conclusion. And basically, I said, well, this is what I know from my economics class. I know that when interest rates are high, equity valuations get depressed, right? And they drop. And first year econ told me that when equity valuations are depressed, capital flows outside of equities and into fixed income, right? So if capital is flowing out, so supply for fixed income remains the same, but there's an increase in demand, i.e., the money is leaving equities and going into fixed income. That must mean that supply is remaining constant, but demand is increasing. Bond yields must be increasing. That was my thought process. Now, knowing what I know now, I know that like bond yields and like bond prices are not the same thing, but I didn't really know that. And I just like, this is what I know. And he's like, you know what? You're completely wrong, but I love your thought process. And he passed me on to the next round. And I was like, oh my goodness. And it's like, he said, you remind me of a young me. You seem hungry. You're interested. And I know you didn't know anything about bonds before this call. They told us that, you kind of just care. But clearly you're interested. You're moving on to the next round. It's the last one. I was like, oh my goodness. Like I guess I skipped like one or two rounds because like that was he told me you're going on to the next round and it's more so confirmatory in nature. I was like, oh my goodness, like I've got a really good shot. And I was like, okay, when's the next round? It was like tomorrow 9 a.m. I was like, oh great. I had a class, but whatever. Like tomorrow 9 a.m. I'll be there. Um, and I had that call with that interview and I got the role shortly after. And when I got the role, I was really excited, but I felt some type of way because like I had a good chance with BMO as well to get an M&A role because I was still in the running over there. But then I started getting nervous about like, do I turn down a role that is definitely here in mind for the chance of M&A at BMO? Like that's not worth like, because God forbid I do and I turn it down for like the role that I really do want and I don't get it. Now I just feel like an idiot. And so I ended up, accepting the RBC one. I emailed Jetty lady from BMO and I'm like, Jetty, thank you so much for all your help. Like she was a great help throughout the remainder of the year, a great resource. I was very interested in BMO. Here's the situation. I know you invested so much time, but I don't like, I don't want to make you feel like I was just used you for your help or whatever it is because I'm accepting this other offer. This was just a situation. I hope you can understand and forgive me, so to speak. And she was super nice about it. Truly a class act. I really appreciated that. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to RBC. And honestly, I didn't even realize that that role was not for that very summer, but it's for the next one. Like when I got the scholarship and I looked at the dates, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not being employed this summer. I'm being employed the summer after that. So what do I do? Like I had heard about like them being super early. So when I saw that it opened up in January, I was like, oh, that's still 6 months away. That is really early. But it's even earlier than I thought it was. because it was a year in advance. I was like, oh my goodness, I still need to find a job for this summer. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to pay tuition. So now I'm scrambling, trying to find any job. I applied. I had put my name into FSWEP, which is like the federal student employment program. So you get to work as for the government. And I was like, if I can get anything in finance, that would be great. I don't care what it is. I just don't want to have to go back to Little Caesars Pizza or McDonald's or whatever it is. Like I want to do something somewhat related to my degree. Thankfully, I got into the government. I worked at Shared Services Canada, and then I worked at DND, Department of National Defense, and I was just like a regular financial analyst position. I was really not doing anything glamorous. DND, like Department of National Defense, it sounds super cool. I really wasn't doing much. Like I'm putting in like a transaction, like a data entry into SAP. Like that's all we were doing. But it's a big name on my resume. Plus, I got RBC coming out the summer after that. I was like, you know what? I'm not working at McDonald's anymore. I can, throw my apron away, throw my hat away. I'm good. It's better than what I thought I was. Plus, I've got RBC, and I skipped the whole random boutique investment bank in the middle of nowhere. I'm one step closer. Like I didn't think I was going to be able to go to RBC until 3 years after graduation, let alone as an intern, right? And so that was my proof of concept. I was like, yeah, I don't need to transfer to Western anymore. I don't need to go to Queens. I can stay at Carleton, save on rent, live at home, save on tuition, no student loans. It's just a perfect match. And I was really loving the community at Carleton. The people that I was around, they were great. I was like, this is perfect. And I did it. I'm good. Little did I know, one of my colleagues on our fund was also going to RBC. So it was just perfect. I was like, oh my God, like we actually did it. We came home, and when I told everybody in our next fund meeting, they're all so happy. They're like, oh my God, someone from our school is actually doing it. Like this is huge news. This is incredible. And there everyone was happy, and everyone seemed to be like revitalized and like, okay, like it is possible. Like we can do it from Carleton, which I was really happy about. And yeah, that was kind of like last year, or I guess 2 years ago now. But it led me into this summer working at RBC. And that was an interesting experience. We could definitely go into that a little bit as well. But I learned a lot. It went by really fast. It's really what they say, drinking from a fire hydrant. Um, but yeah, it was really interesting time.
Okay, everyone. I just realized that we're kind of running past the usual time because Neil has so much great information. So we'll have a part two.
I
For the
tend to
last
talk a lot.
he talks a lot, but it's a lot of substance that I feel like, especially non-target folk, need to hear. Last question to wrap up episode 3, part 1 with Neil. What are your plans next summer? You just finished your sophomore summer at RBC. What's your
Yeah.
third year, junior year summer looking like?
I was really happy to receive an offer to go to Lazard in New York for next summer. Again, I really applied on the limb. I was the next progression. I said, okay, well, you know what? I managed to get this RBC role, which is great. Just in case I don't get a return offer, I'll still apply elsewhere. And I thought, no way Lazard is ever going to accept a little unknown kid from Carleton, from our unknown school, unknown city. People really don't know much about auto, which keeps surprising me as we are the nation's capital. But I applied, and I got in the interview room, and oh my God, okay, this is gonna lead me into talking a bit more. You'll have to forgive me. But um, during the second semester of my second year, so winter semester, second year, I was walking on campus and I saw a random sign that said international internships. And I kind of didn't know what it was, but I asked a few questions. Like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. But you have to pay, and it's a lot of money in order to do this international internship for an unpaid internship, and it just counts as a class credit. I was like, you're asking me to pay $2,000 to do an internship, and I won't even get paid during that internship. I don't think that's really worth the investment. But randomly, I met this guy who was in the program, and he got a placement at this really cool firm that did like special situations equity research, like a really, really niche portion in the market that was really on like spin-off valuation. And it just so happened that during my 4 months there, while I was in school, and I interviewed for Lazard, and they somehow picked my resume up from the pile. And I thought I was going to be like automatically rejected because the very first thing on their application is, "Are you legally entitled to work in the United States?" And I had to click no. I thought, yeah, I'm definitely like in the no pile. But I kept going with the rest of the application. And then I got an interview. We interviewed it, and one of the things that in my first interview, they talked about is the fact that like, oh, you're going to RBC, which is really cool. But they were more so impressed about this like small little niche firm that I had never heard of prior to my internship there, because of spin-off valuation, because apparently that they were working on something similar. And it just like the stars lined up, situation lined up where like they're working on something similar, and I had just finished working on this, and the interviewee, she asked me a couple questions about it, and I'd like to say that I answered them pretty well, and she was impressed. She was like, "Oh my God, like I'm working on this, and I actually found those same results over here in terms of like factors that make a good performing spinoff, or factors that lead to this or that about the spinoff market." It was just perfect timing, and she was like, "You know what, like." We spent like the 20-25 minute interview. We spent a good portion of the time talking about that, as well as a few other technical questions. But she was like, "You know what? I think you did really good. I had a really good feeling about it." And she sent me on to the next round. And even in the next round, like more than my expected time at RBC, it was my incoming, like my internship with this, small firm that they were more so impressed by. And eventually, towards the end of my summer, obviously, I received the offer, and I accepted it. And yeah, I guess I'm going to Lazard next summer in New York, which is huge. I'm really excited. But yeah, like I still like could not believe it. Like when I got the offer, he called me. Like I got the call after a super day, and I'm sure we'll get into that later on. But I literally jumped around like a madman, like fist pumping, air guitar, like whatever you can imagine. I was doing that, and I accidentally did not mute myself. So I'm sure he heard. He didn't
Oh,
mention anything. He didn't mention anything. Um, so I don't know if he heard whether or not, but like I was fist pumping and jumping around. I thought I was on mute, but I wasn't. Um, so yeah, that's a little funny story for you there.
well, that's amazing. And did you end up paying the $2,000 for that like international internship? Like, or
No,
you met someone that kind
no.
of did it
So
too?
yeah, so I met someone who did it, and he was nice enough to put me in contact with like his boss. Like he was already like at the role. He had started maybe a week prior or whatever, and he had accepted the offer to do that role. And yeah, so he sent me the email of his boss. I reached out to the boss. The boss interviewed me. I think we hit it off. It went pretty well. And he was like, "You know what? Yeah, I mean, it's a really low cost investment for them. Like it's an unpaid internship." Um, but he was very, very nice. And he's like, "You know what? Yeah, we'll bring you on. You're gonna be here for 4 months, and kind of make the most of it." And so I kind of got away with not having to pay for the program, which was really good,
Got it.
for me, anyways. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. And where was the like company based if it's like international? Is
they
it
were
not?
based in New York, actually. They
Oh,
were based in New York, so it was international, but like it was just down the street, really. But again, like I think maybe Lazard thought that it was in person and that helped. Or maybe he already has a visa. I'm not exactly sure, to be completely honest with you. But on my
yeah.
resume, I put where the company is headquartered in, which is New York.
Yes.
And yeah, and even then, like even when I made it, every round I made it through, I was like, at first I felt like I was playing with house money. I was like, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm looking at the names on Wall Street Oasis of people who said they had like these offers, and I look at their LinkedIn profiles. They go to Harvard or Wharton. One guy was from Oxford. I'm like, okay, I made it to the next round, and this is my competition. Like, I don't know that I should necessarily be like. I just felt like imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
But I also felt like I was playing with house money, right? Like I have nothing to lose. I'm
Yeah.
I'm, I'm here for vibes, really. Like I hope I
Really,
get it,
really.
but I'm purely playing with house money. It wasn't until I got to the super day where I was like, I actually have something to lose here, because I didn't think I was going to make it this far. now I'm feeling the pressure of like I need to make this. I'm also telling my friends like I somehow made it past this. Like I'm doing good. And then by the time I got to the super day where I was like, I would be so mad if I made it this far and this is when I dropped. Like I would feel better being dropped in the first round than I would
Yeah.
this close to the goalpost. Um, but yeah, and so I did the super day. It was a rough super day, really tough, like four back-to-back interviews, 45 minutes long.
Oh,
It
holy.
was it was it was a rough one. It was a rough one. But yeah, I did the super day, called my mom, called my dad, called my friend. I'm cooking myself supper by this point. Like they told us like is this like maybe like a Thursday? They told us we'll know early next week. And they said they'd call us either way because there's only 8 people left. So I think they're, the time that it would take to call everyone, let them know wasn't that big. So, I'm cooking myself dinner. I have my phone in the living room. I'm in the kitchen dicing up onions, trying not to cry. And I'm talking to my friend, he's asking me how I went, and then my phone rings, and then Siri announces like the area code. I'm like, that's a New York number. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna have to call you back. They're calling me, right? I'm like, as I run to my phone and I pick it up, in my mind, I'm like, this is gonna be bad news. They said they would let us know early next week. The only reason they're calling me right now is because I did so bad that like they can eliminate me right away. You know what I mean? Like that's the only reason why you're calling me this early. And then he's asking me, "Hey Neil, how are you? How are you doing?" I'm like, I'm doing good. I'm just kind of hoping I'm not getting about to get some bad news. And he decides to be a comedian. He says, "Well, I regret to inform you that it's not bad news. It's great news. I'm pleased to announce you that." And I just start, punching the air, fist pumping, jumping around, like the whole shebang. But yeah, I was just so happy. And honestly, it hasn't sinked in yet. Like I know I'm going there, but it doesn't feel like I'm going there. I probably won't feel like it until I like am there in person again.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah. What an amazing story. And last little side question here. Did you network at
yeah.
all? 'Cause you said like your resume in the pile.
I just threw it in the pile. Like I was very adamant about networking with everywhere else. I randomly stumbled upon like I was in this very room. I'm in my fund room, right, for our fund at school. I was scrolling through LinkedIn. Someone had liked a post about Lazard applications opening up, and it popped up on my feed. And I was like, you know what? Like, should I apply? Should I not apply? I don't know. Called my girlfriend. We were talking for a bit, and she was like, you know what? Like, you have nothing to lose. Like, go ahead, apply. If it works out, it works out. But you have a 0% chance if you don't apply. I was like, you know
Yeah.
what? You're right. Screw it. Make my application. Again, when I saw that, like the very first thing before they asked for my name or my school or anything, the first thing they asked me is, are you legally entitled to work in the United States? I was like, this is not a good start. This is not a
No.
good start. But it worked out in my favor, and I'm really thankful for it. But
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure. And same with me, like randomly just applied to Goldman. I was like, should I, shouldn't I? Did network because it's like
yeah,
I have no hope. But like I will network for RBC because I
yeah.
think there, but Goldman, not so
If
much.
yeah, yeah, same here. Like for whatever reason, the States, New York, all the firms over there, it felt out of reach. It was like, I'm not there yet. Let me still apply so I have like a sliver of a chance, but this is where I think I really have a chance. So let me go there. And I remember actually in my first year was stumbling across your videos and you're talking about like your process and receiving the Goldman offer. I was like, man, this girl is so cool. She's getting offers from Goldman. And then I get to the end of the video and I found out that you rejected Goldman. I was like, what? This girl rejected Gold. Like this is a big. This is like the la creme de la creme, the ultimate bank, and you said no to them. How? I was like, and I don't know. Just yeah. Long story short, stumbled across your page, and I was like, oh my god, I'm finally doing what she did. Am I gonna say yes or no? I'm definitely saying yes. but
Well,
uh, but yeah,
I'm glad you could say yes, and
yeah,
we will be staying in tune with your story and everything.
absolutely,
Where can
absolutely.
people like connect with you? Is LinkedIn like a good place?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'll send you my link. Maybe you can put in the all the YouTubers say they put links in the description. So you can put in the description down
Yes.
below. But yeah, feel free to reach out. I'm always on it, and give a helping hand. Whether you go to Carleton, Ottawa U, or any non-target or target school, feel free to reach out. Whatever I can do to help, I'm always down.
Yeah.
I'm also not a master at this. Like I don't want to come off like I know everything. I really don't. One thing this summer has taught me at RBC is I really know very, very little. But what I am is a student of the game, as like like the same basketball. And so I'm always down to learn. But I'm also always willing to, tell the people what I've learned so that, maybe it helps them. So whatever we can do to get more non-targetees like us into banking and finance, I'm all for it. Yeah,
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think that's a good sign to wrap up here. We will have part two
absolutely.
next Friday. So thank you so much, Neil, for
Sounds
joining me.
good.
And yeah, I'll see you guys all there. Bye, everyone.
Pleasure's all mine. Take care.